We begin this hour with Los Angeles bracing for more demonstrations today. It would be the fourth day of protests against the White House's immigration crackdown, and we are increasingly seeing a fraught relationship between the Trump administration and leaders in California. The state's governor, Gavin Newsom, is promising to sue the federal government over President Trump deploying California's National Guard, despite opposition from the governor and LA's mayor.
Donald Trump has created the conditions you see on your TV tonight. He's exacerbated the conditions. He's, lit the proverbial match. He's putting fuel on this fire ever since he announced he was taking over the National Guard.
Around 300 National Guard troops are in L.A. right now. This is video of some of them clashing with protesters on Sunday outside the city's federal building. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says 500 Marines are also standing by to be deployed. The clashes between police and protesters began on Friday. Federal agents carried out workplace raids at multiple locations. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says they took more than 100 people into custody last week. On his way back to the White House from Camp David today, President Trump was asked about his border czar, Tom Homan, raising the possibility of arresting California Governor Gavin Newsom if the governor got in the way of immigration operations. Here's what the president had to say.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I was Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing.
Leading us off this hour from Los Angeles is NBC News correspondent David Noriega. Also with us, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hillyard and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. David, let me start with you. The LAPD said last night that all of downtown Los Angeles is declared an unlawful assembly area. What does that mean, and what are you seeing right now in preparation for perhaps later demonstrations?
Well, Kate, just to give you a sense of how we got to where we are, directly behind me you will see the National Guard troops that have triggered this latest wave of protests. They are currently posted up outside of the federal building, which is also outside of the Metropolitan Detention Center, where a number of the people who were detained in these ICE raids starting on Friday were first held before being moved to other ICE processing centers outside of the city. That federal building, this federal property, was really the target of the protesters starting on Friday, and especially became the target of the protesters yesterday once those National Guard troops were stationed there. Now, yesterday, after protesters from multiple points in the city converged on this point downtown, initially they had scuffles with the National Guardsmen and with DHS police. Eventually, local law enforcement came, LAPD came, and using crowd control, non-lethal munitions, rubber bullets, foam rounds, tear gas, pushed the protesters away towards other parts of downtown. It was at that point that LAPD declared an unlawful assembly for a large swath of the downtown area. And as of this morning, there is very heavy law enforcement presence across downtown, not just LAPD, not just LA County sheriffs, but Ventura County, Orange County, Santa Barbara County sheriffs. You have PDs from Beverly Hills, Pasadena. Pretty much every law enforcement agency in Southern California is represented in downtown LA today, trying to prevent the kinds of scenes we saw yesterday from happening again. Now, Kate, there are some protests that are scheduled to take place in downtown. The ACLU and some labor unions are holding a protest nearby in Grand Park. Some students are supposed to walk out and converge here later. We'll see just how tense and confrontational those gatherings become, Kate.
All right, David, thank you. We'll come back to you in a second. Vaughn, the president says that he made a, quote, great decision to send in the National Guard. What are we hearing from the White House?
The White House is defending the president's decision to federalize the National Guard. One thing we should be clear about is, compared to the first administration under then-President Trump back in 2020, during the George Floyd protests, he had called for the National Guard to be deployed by governors, and he even acknowledged in 2020 that he did not have the power at the time, this were his own words, to send in the National Guard himself. Fast forward to 2023, when he was on the presidential campaign trail, he said that if he were to get back into office, he would do different things differently this time around and not wait for governors to deploy the National Guard. Instead, he'd seek to use the law to send them in himself. And here in 2025, that is exactly what he has done. Of course, we have heard widespread pushback, particularly from California Governor Gavin Newsom, who the President of the United States here just in the last hour suggested that he would like to see be arrested. For what crime, it is not clear. There is no criminal activity that has been alleged by the California governor. But in just the last few moments, Newsom tweeting out in response, the president of the United States just called for the arrest of a sitting governor. This is a day I hoped I would never see in America. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. This is a line we cannot cross as a nation. This is an unmistakable step toward authoritarianism. It is not clear where this is heading and what the White House is seeking to use the National Guard for beyond their current capacity, which they're there right now here in the days ahead. Kate.